Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, our post-game edition of the podcast here. The Browns losers in Chicago, 31-3. Dan Labbe with Mary Kate Cabot, Ashley Bastock, and we are going to break this game down. We are, of course, all in Chicago. If you happen to be watching on the YouTube, you'll notice that we're all sitting in the exact same spots in our hotel rooms. Literally, I guess the desks in these rooms must all be in the same place. There we go. We got the vents behind us. We got windows, the noises of Chicago outside of them as well. All right. Let's get to this, Mary Kay. There is a lot to talk about in this game, but of course, the person everyone wants to talk about is Shedeur Sanders. So obviously, after that great game he had a week ago, threw for over 300 yards, had a lot of people talking about do the Browns maybe have something here in Shedeur? Today, a much rougher outing, 18 of 35, 177 yards, 3 interceptions, a 30.3 rating. Now, obviously, not all of that was his fault, but as you kind of look at the way Shedeur Sanders played today, as you look at what you saw from Shedeur, this sort of felt like what we saw before last week, at least to me. A couple spectacular throws, some wow moments, some questionable decisions. Again, some things that weren't his fault. What did you think of the performance from Shedeur Sanders today?
It was definitely a step back for Shedeur Sanders, and it was definitely a clunker of a game for him. Now, there were extenuating circumstances, of course. He had a makeshift line in front of him. Joel Bitonio was the only OG, the only original offensive lineman still starting on that line. And by the fourth quarter, by the second half, even his backup guard, Tevin Jenkins, was out of the game. So that didn't help matters. And then he didn't have David Njoku. He really didn't have Cedric Tillman very much at all. I don't know how many snaps, but I don't think it was a whole bunch. And he didn't even get a target. And Jerry Jeudy, when he perfectly placed the ball in Jerry Jeudy's hands for a touchdown pass, Jerry Jeudy had it snatched out of his hands for an interception that led to a touchdown. So that was a huge 14-point swing right there. So he did not get a lot of help. But when you're just looking at the traits of Shedeur Sanders, it didn't go the way that I'm sure he wanted it to, or the way that the Browns wanted it to. He didn't take another step up to show them, hey, I have to be your guy, right? He was inconsistent on a lot of his throws. He only completed about 52% of his passes, and that's not going to cut it. And with the 3 interceptions, he now has a total of 6 against 5 touchdown passes for a rating of 68 something total for his career so far for his 4 starts. And it just wasn't the next step up that he needed to say, hey, I'm your guy. Now, the Browns know he's a rookie. They know he's going to have a clunker. That's what happens with these young quarterbacks. They have a good game, and then they're going to have a not so good game. They have a good play, and then they might have a horrible play or two. So it was not unexpected for him to kind of go out there and have one of these kind of games. But now he's got to put a stop to it. He has to rebound. He has to go out against those Buffalo Bills on Sunday. And even though they're a really good team and they're 10-4 right now, he's going to have a much better performance than he had today to continue to show the Browns that they don't have to draft that quarterback in the first round.
Yeah, and Ashley, I think this speaks to how difficult, when we've talked about this on this pod, how difficult it is to kind of get a full evaluation of him, right? Because there's going to be, just even if it ends up being a full 7-game sample size, which barring injury it will be, we're still just going to have some ups and downs like this. And a game like this is a perfect example of what it can look like, where he is, again, just some beautiful throws. The one throw, we were talking about it on the Uber back to the hotel, the throw to Isaiah Bond from the angle we had, the first deep ball to him was it was a beautiful throw. The throw to Jeudy that got interception that was a perfectly placed football. So there are these moments like that in these football games, but then there's also the interceptions, right? And not the Jeudy one, but the one where the linebacker baits him into a throw. There were a couple of bad sacks, nothing egregious today like what we saw against Baltimore or against the Rams in the preseason, but there were some bad sacks, and he got saved from a strip sack today too. So, that's what makes this difficult to really get a full judgment on Shedeur. And I think also it's why we need to continue to be patient and let this play out over the rest of this season.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And look, I think there was so much outside of Shedeur Sanders and outside of those mistakes that was not ideal circumstances. Obviously, none of them, none of the players, Shedeur didn't want to make the weather a factor, but I think, like, undeniably it was. And I think you saw it on both sides. Even Cairo Santos missing that 35-yard field goal for the Bears in the second quarter. Like, I thought you saw it in moments like that. I think it did play a factor in that Jeudy missed catch. Like, the physics of the ball quite literally changes when it is this cold outside. So I think that was one thing. The other big thing, and it's what I wrote in my zero story after the game, I think Shedeur Sanders is just not being helped right now by the fact that this O-line is a skeleton crew. It's Joel Bitonio and a bunch of backups currently. And it's unfortunate because, like, it's so hard, I think, to gauge when there's all these protection issues happening, right? Some of the sacks and stuff, like you said, Dan, some of them were bad. I want to rewatch the game before I specifically start singling out which ones were worse than others. But when your quarterback's getting hit 15 total times and sacked 5 times, it's hard to get into any kind of flow. It's hard for a rookie to keep their confidence. It's just incredibly disruptive to the whole thing. And like the analogy I used in my story is like the D line, they always say is like the engine of their defense, right? That's what Jim Schwartz uses. I think for the Browns and their offense, the O line is like the spine. Like everything needs to be in alignment. When it's not, it throws everything else off, and you don't appreciate how much it does for you until something is going wrong. And I think they're in a really unfortunate spot with that O-line. We're going to probably have multiple offseason podcasts about the future of this O-line. But Shedeur was really not helped by that, by having, a guy like David Njoku out who could be a primary target for him, who helps with the blocking, right? Like there were so many guys on that injury report today. It really just did him no favors.
Yeah, and again, that's why this is so... not just the sample size, Mary Kay, but also they're trying to get this evaluation of Shedeur Sanders, and they're trying to do it with, like, again, this skeleton Luke Whippler starting at center, which, I guess Luke Whippler played well. I don't know. I'll have to go back and watch. We'll see. Their third string guard, their, like all those things Ashley was saying about the O-line. Your number one receiver isn't helping you out. There are a lot of things outside of Shedeur's control, but also, you try to separate that stuff out with some of the things that maybe Shedeur could have done better, and that's what makes this hard. But that's also what makes this evaluation of Shedeur so difficult. They're not really set up right now to properly evaluate a quarterback, because I don't know if this game changes if Jerry Jeudy makes that catch, but it certainly makes the tenor of this performance from Shedeur completely different if Jerry makes that catch and it doesn't turn into an interception. So this is just, I don't know what kind of evaluation we're ultimately going to have on him after this season.
Well, I think what they have to do, and I wrote about this today a little bit in some of my Hayes or Insider or something like that, what they have to do is they really have to isolate and look at what Shedeur is doing almost in a vacuum in some cases, right? They have to look at the traits. They have to see, is the ball going to the right place? And today, more often than not, it did not. And that's a concern. And even when he had some time, he was kind of off on some of his throws. And so they have to go back and watch this film and find out what that was all about. And he has to figure out what that was all about. And maybe once again, he wasn't trusting what he was seeing. Or maybe there were miscommunications with some of his receivers. As I mentioned before, he didn't have some of his top people out there. And too often the ball was going to Harold Fannin. You can't do that every single time. You cannot keep throwing the ball and go to that well, because they're going to be onto you. That's not going to work for you. You've got to spread the ball around more than that. He has to trust more people than Harold Fannin on a lot of those throws. I mean, most of the other guys only got like 4 targets. I don't think anybody else got more than 4 targets, and that's not going to fly. And when it comes to your wide receivers, Isaiah Bond got 4 targets, Jerry Jeudy got 4 targets, Malachi Corley got 1, Gage got 2, Harold Fannin 14 targets, 7 for 14, and that's when you start to get guys looking for the ball going to him. And it gets easier for them to telegraph those plays and to pick it off, which is what happened on the third interception. So I do think that they really need to try to isolate on the decision making, the accuracy, the footwork, and those kinds of things, because results are probably not going to happen to the extent that you want them to for the rest of this season. They don't have the offensive line. They don't have the supporting cast to have a really good passing game right now. So some of it is going to be guesswork. And that's just the name of the game.
Yeah, and look, I mean, that's, like I said, that's hard, but that is also their job. They have to figure this stuff out, and they have to make a decision because, look, the fastest way forward is for Shedeur Sanders to be your starting quarterback. Cool, you found a 5th-round pick. He's cheap for the next 3 years after this year. It helps mitigate the Deshaun contract. It allows you to use some of those assets now to build up all these areas where you are in trouble on the O-line and at wide receiver, or even continue to add to this defense. Like, I don't think there's any argument that that's not the best thing to happen from a team building standpoint. I don't know that we're going to get to the end of this season, though, Ashley, and have an answer on that just because of all of those things. And again, even the small sample size. This team obviously didn't believe in Shedeur Sanders enough to take him before the 5th round. So, and didn't believe in him enough to give him first team reps in training camp and all of that stuff. So is 7 games of up and down play, which, by the way, you'd expect from a rookie, 7 games of up and down play, going to be enough for you to say, yeah, that's our guy. Let's move forward. There's a lot of risk in that. Just like there's a lot of risk in trading a bunch of picks to get Fernando Mendoza. So whoever's making these decisions in the offseason, I don't envy them.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. And like the interesting thing when you think big picture about this Browns front office and Andrew Berry and sort of how he's operated. And look, it's hard to get him and Kevin, like we joke about this, talk about this all the time, to like really say anything. But when you've had people in these positions now for 5-6 years, you pick up on patterns and you pick up on the way they do things. And like, I do wonder if they are going to convince themselves that, hey, yeah, this is a big enough sample size and yeah, conditions weren't ideal. So we're going to go forward, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But you look at their history, right? And I think about things like them, extending Jerry Jeudy before he ever plays a game, right? Because they saw something and oh my gosh, last year it looked like, yeah, they were on to something there. They had cracked the case of Jerry Jeudy. And now look at this year and how he's kind of turned that corner back in the opposite direction. I think about them doing something like extending Dustin Hopkins after one good year in 2023 when he was already under contract for the following year. Like, I think about these little moments and think about what it could mean in terms of how they approach quarterback. And like, I think the reality is we just don't know. Like, maybe they will look at it and be like, oh, it's too small, the sample size. We don't want to take ourselves out of the running. Or maybe they're going to look at it and be like, all the things we said up top here, right, about the value of the deal, the value of having somebody in the 5th round, and it does help do all those things with the cap hell or purgatory you are still going to be in because of the Deshaun Watson contract. And maybe they look at some of the positive things and think, you know what, we can work with this. Why not? But I will say if they do that, I think it's fair to still be wary about the sample size, while it's also still fair to be wary about the circumstances surrounding Shedeur Sanders via the offensive line, the receiving core, all those things.
Okay, well, we're going to talk a lot about Shedeur Sanders. There's some other things we need to get to, and we certainly need to probably spend some time on Jerry Jeudy before we go. But the other part of this, too, is, look, a lot of people are not happy with what's happening on the sidelines. And today it felt very chaotic, especially early in the game. So it starts with a 52-yard kick return. So the Bears get a 52-yard kick return to start the game. So once again, another special teams blunder, and the Bears set up in great field position. Then the Browns' first possession from their own one after a failed challenge. There's a false start on Harold Fannin. And then I actually had to go back and watch this play. So after Quinshon Judkins gets a yard, the Browns actually lined up 12 guys. I thought it was 12 men in the huddle. But then I went back and watched the play. They actually had 12 guys in alignment on offense. And Harold Fannin kind of went in motion and kind of just keeps running towards the sideline like he's just going to run off the field. It was actually pretty funny to watch. But Mary Kay, there are a lot of repeated mistakes happening, and there are a lot of procedural things, and a lot of, you got an answer to the wristband situation. It was just a matter of the thing fell out, and so they needed to get that card back in the wristband. So they get a pass on that one, at least for now. But it just feels very chaotic. And a lot of the things that I think, at least we felt like weren't happening under Kevin Stefanski in years past, are happening. And it just adds to this mess of, here we are 2 years in a row. This team has 3 wins. I guess to put it, it's too late to put this the short way, but I'll put it the short way now. If Kevin Stefanski was making a case for his job, or if he had to make a case for his job today, this was not a great day for that.
But you know what? If they are looking for reasons to let go of Kevin Stefanski, they are finding them. If they need to point to some games and to some situations, they can point to some things that happened in the Titans game, including the 2-point conversion at the end of the game where they took Shedeur Sanders off the field, even though he had an incredibly hot hand at the time, having gone 9 of 10 for 107 yards on his final 2 touchdown drives to bring them back. To take off someone off the field who is on a mission to win the football game for you, that's one thing I think that they would look to. And then in this game, as you mentioned, there were so many procedural things and so many things that went wrong in this football game that I think that they could look at this game too and say, if nothing else, it needs to be efficient. It needs to be a clean operation. It needs to look organized. Now, I would argue that it looks very, very difficult to look that way and to be that clean and to be that efficient when you are, first of all, starting a rookie quarterback who just started working with the ones 4 weeks ago. He slipped to 1-3 with this loss. And this was a good defensive coordinator in Dennis Allen. Very savvy, good defensive coordinator that went against Shedeur Sanders. And you could tell after the game that Shedeur was like, I can't wait to go back and watch the film and see some of the things. Shout out to them because they did a really nice job. I think they were changing things up and really trying to confuse him, and knew that they could probably do that because he's so green and raw and just a rookie out there that hasn't had much time with the starters yet. But I do think that if Kevin Stefanski does want to make sure that he's coaching this football team next year, it's got to be cleaner in these final 3 games. He's got to make a strong case. He's got to make a strong case because if they decide they need new energy, a new voice, a new face of the team, they will point to a couple of these games and say, here's why we feel like we want to make a change.
Yeah, that's I think the big problem right now for Kevin is he's giving them too many reasons, because you could sit here and make, I think, legitimate excuses for Kevin, because we have seen him have some success, right? And you can make legitimate, like, this quarterback situation has been bizarre, from the start. How much of a hand did he have in that? I don't know, but the 4-man quarterback competition, the way they set up this room, using those 2 picks on the rookies. And, if Kevin was sitting there pounding the table for Dylan Gabriel, that might be a strike against him too. Not giving Shedeur Sanders an opportunity, so he's not ready when his turn comes. There's things like that. So for the excuses you can make, though, right? Like, well, he hasn't had his quarterback and his team is young. And I think some of those are legitimate excuses, Ashley. The problem is when you're having these repeated issues where the special teams are bad every week, and he's not the special teams coordinator, but he's responsible for it. Special teams are bad every week. You're not getting aligned. You got 12 men on the field. All of those that you're losing to the Titans, you're losing to the Jets. It's just all of those things eventually add up. And I think Mary Kay hammered the point home there. It's Kevin is not giving them a reason to not fire him if they're looking for a reason to fire him.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I like the way that Mary Kay put that if you're looking for a reason, if you're the Browns and you're looking for a reason, I would add, if you're looking for a scapegoat, I think there are things you can find to point to Kevin. And I made this point on our video, and I think it's worth reiterating, this idea of Kevin Stefanski gave up play calling, right, to Tommy Rees after the bye week. We came back. Tommy's been calling plays. So if you're a head coach, and by the way, you're the head coach that the front office has repeatedly said one of the things they love about you is your play calling, right? We went through this whole thing last year, too, when he handed it over to Ken Dorsey. And then he took it back when Tommy became the offensive coordinator. And Andrew Berry reiterates how much they love him for his play calling. So you've now given up that thing. You've given up the play calling. You've given up all the machinations and things you have to worry about when you are the offensive play caller. You've handed it off. These procedural things should be pristine at this point, right? Now, and we talked about this in the video as well, like there is an idea that so many of these guys are rookies. Like you could argue the bottom of the roster just is bad, right? Like that has contributed to special teams. It's contributed to some of the offensive issues. But again, I think in the NFL, when you're talking about like possible reasons, there are those reasons. They do exist. And it's a matter of, is Kevin Stefanski, like to me, it's a matter of, is Kevin Stefanski going to wind up as a scapegoat sort of for all of this that's gone wrong? And look, there are things that Kevin has done that I think fans have legitimate gripes for it driving them crazy. But there's other things that I think you can look at rationally and be like, okay, that's not his fault, like necessarily. But I don't know. It's like the politics of an NFL team is, or are these reasons going to go on the con side of the ledger for keeping him? I think that's the big question.
Yeah, and look, I'll be honest. I know that there are a lot of fans out there that just they want to have the fire and brimstone, fire Kevin Stefanski now discussion. I mean, I'm leaning that way. I don't know if I'm all the way there yet, though. And I think, Mary Kay, a part of that is how much of this is Kevin, how much of this is the roster as a whole. Just when I kind of look at, like, look, Andrew had a very good draft this past year, right? Harold Fannin is a hit. Mason Graham is a hit. Quinshawn's a hit. I think Dylan Sampson is a good player, a good role player. We'll see about the quarterbacks. But Carson Schlesinger, right? Stud. But also the rest of this roster is certainly, there have been some decisions that have been made that haven't worked. And Jerry Jeudy, right? That's an example. Although this time a year ago we thought it was a hit. Right now it doesn't feel that way. So I don't know that necessarily Andrew gets a pass just because his last draft was awesome too. I think that's why this is so complicated. And I don't know what we're going to be talking about 4 weeks from now after that Bengals game. If we're going to be jumping off a pod because a bunch of firings happen in the middle of us recording a post-game pod. But I don't know that this is like a just Kevin problem. I think there are some roster issues here too, that the fact that Andrew had a really good draft this last time, I think people are overlooking some of them.
I do remember being at the NFL annual meeting in March, and Jimmy Haslam stated in no uncertain terms that Andrew Berry had to nail this draft, that he needed to have a really, really good draft. And I think Andrew delivered. I think he answered the bell with the kind of draft that Jimmy was looking for. And he also made that trade down to pick up the first round pick in the 2026 draft. And if you use that pick or a combination of that pick and your own pick, and you end up with your franchise quarterback, then that changes the game totally on this draft. And Andrew has spent so much time crisscrossing the nation and scouting these quarterbacks for the 2026 draft that also leads me to believe it's such an important draft coming up in 2026. I don't think that they would want to just fire him and not have him trying to make this very, very important decision on whether or not they need to draft a quarterback, and if they do, which one should they draft? I think it would leave too much of a gaping hole in the whole process. I think this year was laying the foundation for Super Bowl window 2, and I think next year is sort of the finishing touches on the Super Bowl window and trying to get into place all the pieces that they need, including the quarterback. And once they have that, then I think that they feel like they will be a contender. So I'm not feeling it for Andrew, but I mean, I can't say for sure. I don't know what Jimmy's thinking. I talked to Jimmy on the sidelines of practice the other day for just a couple of minutes, and we were making a tiny bit of small talk. And before you know it, he walked away. And it probably was because he doesn't want to be answering questions right now about anything. He does not want to get into anything about what's going to happen after the season. They are probably going to take a hard look at some things. Some changes will be made. We just don't know what those changes are going to be yet. We really don't know. I don't know if for sure right now if Kevin is safe. I don't know if he's not safe. I think that he really needs to show some things in these last 3 games that the whole operation is efficient and headed in the right direction.
Yeah, and the other issue too, kind of in this, is when you talk about changes they would make, if we just stick with coaching, we just went through this where 2 years in a row they basically torpedoed the entire offensive side of the ball, right? They got rid of a bunch of Kevin's guys on one side, brought in Ken Dorsey, then they blew it up again, got rid of Ken Dorsey, gave control back to Kevin, hired Tommy Rees, who's a Kevin guy. So like they can't do that again. I don't think. I mean, I guess they could, but they can't really sell that again necessarily. As well, we're going to blame Tommy Rees and move on to somebody else. So that's the other issue Kevin faces here is the offense has been really bad this year. And this was a take back the offense year for Kevin Stefanski. And again, it's not all, the talent level has certainly not been good enough on that side, the quarterback position, the receiver position, all of that. So I think it's a collective failure on the offensive side of the ball. So I don't know. And then if you're going to take a quarterback, you've got to make sure you have the right guy in place to coach that quarterback. And, just to throw another wrinkle into this, if we were to just name the hot coaching candidates off the top of our heads, a lot of them right now are on the defensive side of the ball. So you can fire Kevin and hire one of these, like a Jesse Minter, but that also means you're sending Jim Schwartz packing too, and the staff on that defensive side of the ball for the most part. So this is a complicated decision on a lot of levels, Ashley, but I think one of the things that could come back to kind of bite Kevin is this offense has gotten blown up 2 years in a row. And that's not going to work again. If they're looking to do a little bloodletting, it might just be, it's got to be Kevin.
Yeah, you've already blown up the coordinators, like not even just the offense, right? Like they blew up special teams and defense the year prior. So there's nothing left. That's why when I use the term for the scapegoat, Kevin is what is left in theory. And that's what makes this so difficult because again, I think, and Mary Kate's done reporting on this, I don't feel like Tommy Rees is thought of poorly. In the way that it felt like Ken Dorsey was by the end last year, it felt like that was something that was very obviously coming. It doesn't feel like that with Tommy Rees either. It doesn't feel like there's any smoke or momentum towards that being a thing that happens. So that's the other fascinating part about it all. And look, it's just going to be really rough, I think, if this is another 3-win season. And people always bring up that other Jimmy Haslam quote from, I think it was the owners' meetings. Mary Kay, tell me if I'm wrong about the 3, or it might have been training camp, about 3 wins isn't going to cut it. It was either the owners' meetings or training camp. It was within the last year. Mary Kay's nodding when I said training camp, so I think that's when it was. So I think about that too. And you just wonder, owners are fickle, right? You don't always know what they're thinking, and that is the ultimate X factor in this discussion too.
Yeah, and listen, to Jimmy and Dee's credit, they've been very patient with this front office. We're on coaching staff. We're into year 6, so they've been patient with it. And they, at the owners' meetings, they took the blame for the Deshaun Watson thing. We've had this discussion on this podcast before. I don't necessarily believe that was all Jimmy and Dee, but they took the blame for that publicly, at least. So one other thing that I want to talk about is this Jerry Jeudy situation, because I wrote about Jerry tonight, and it's just, to me, I mean, I said it earlier, a year ago at this time, Mary Kay, we're talking about this Jerry Jeudy trade. Man, Andrew nailed this one. This was Amari Cooper 2.0. He did it again. He used a couple day 3 picks. He went and found Jerry Jeudy, this undervalued gem. He comes here. He has 1,200 receiving yards. And then this year has just been weird all around. He has 8 drops, the 3rd highest drop percentage according to PFF among qualified receivers. He has that play today through his hands, off his chest. It turns into an interception. He has the fumble in Las Vegas. He's having weird press conferences with us. And this is a guy that we almost voted good guy last year for how good he was with the media. This has just been a weird year for Jerry Jeudy. And the thing that I came back to today is, yes, it's been bad. And yes, there are real questions about, was last year the outlier? But also, he turns 27 in April. Like, he's still relatively young. So how do the Browns approach this with him moving forward?
It's a really good question. And I think that some of it will come down to what happens at quarterback. And I think it will come down to discussions that perhaps Jerry and his agent maybe have with the Browns about where this thing is headed and what his role is going to be. But certainly, I think the Browns are going to have to add to the wide receiver room. I think that Jerry would benefit from the Browns having another Pro Bowl caliber receiver on that core. I think that would really help him. I don't think he's benefited at all from the quarterback play this season, which has been very erratic most of the time. I mean, think about the fact that each one of these quarterbacks, Joe, Dylan, Shedeur, they've each only won one football game. So I don't think that's helped Jerry at all. I don't think the four-way quarterback competition helped anybody. I really don't. They can't do that again. No matter what they decide to do with the quarterback, they have to know, I think, in my opinion, heading into training camp, who their QB1 is, and let that guy just cook from the beginning. You cannot mess around with those precious first team reps and all the work that you need to get that chemistry and that timing down with your guys. So I think Jerry has been a victim of sort of the dysfunctional quarterback situation. And I think he'll be a lot better when he has a stable quarterback. And if they have that, I think you'll see closer to the performance that you saw out of Jerry last year.
Yeah, and I don't think, again, this is one of those things I think people just, I get it. They're frustrated with Jerry. I think they just want everyone to just go after Jerry and talk about how bad he's been. He's been bad. Like, we know that. We see it. But maybe he's not as good as he was last year. And that seems likely. I just am not convinced, Ashley, he's as bad as he's been this year. I don't know if there's something going on. He had a weird answer a couple weeks ago about, I play football, but basically telling us I have a life outside of football after that weird press conference he did with us. Like, I don't know. I just feel like there is a talented receiver still in there. And I think it's probably still worth trying to unlock, in part because I don't know if they can do anything with that contract anyway right now.
Yeah, I know. I think you and I, Dan, have both looked at the numbers, and it's very cost prohibitive for a team that already has some very, very real and intense salary cap issues. Yeah, I keep thinking about that answer too. That the answer Dan is referring to, as people might remember, before the Raiders game, he gave that press conference where everything was between like 1 and 3 answers, and then the following week he came up to the podium and got asked about it and made the comment about football's like what he does, but it's not his whole life, which points to something off the field, or at least that week that something off the field was going on. When the cliff happens like this, to your point, Dan, like, he's still young, that you don't think he's going to fall off that cliff the way like Amari Cooper did when he hit 30. Like, it's different when it's a player and a receiver still in their 20s. You have to wonder. But man, it's also weird just because, like, yeah, the quarterback upheaval has been a lot. It's been a lot to deal with, but that's something he went through last year here. It's also something he went through a lot in Denver. Like, he's talked about it and how it impacted him, but it never really impacted him to this extent. I mean, this is his worst year he's had when he's been healthy. And the only other year was in Denver when he wasn't healthy. And like, it's been some career worst games for him with targets and catches and all that. So I don't know. I'm with you. Like, I would find it improbable. Like, I think there's, who knows? It could be a combination of all these things, right? Something off the field, something, with all the quarterback changes, something with, the health of the players around him. Maybe it's a little bit teams figuring him out a little bit more after last year. For as bad as the Browns were, Jerry was one of the few highlights. He made his first Pro Bowl, had his first 1,000-yard season. defensive coordinators start to look at you a bit more and pay attention to you a bit more, and the Browns don't have any other weapons. Like, I still can't help but wonder, for years and years and years, we've sat here and what are they going to do about this wide receiver room? And they never do anything. They never add anything. For 3 years, they didn't have first round picks, and they couldn't dip into the well that way. That didn't help things. So I can't help but wonder if they just didn't add a bit more talent into that room via, I don't know, one of your 2 first round draft picks, if that would help and help make Jerry less of a focus for these opposing defenses too. Maybe that would do something.
Yeah, it's just another decision. It's just another thing they have to figure out in this offseason. Okay, we're going to wrap up our post-game podcast there. Get subscribed to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also find our YouTube channel, Cleveland Browns, on cleveland.com. Our Instagram is Orange and Brown Talk. Our Twitter's Orange Brown Talk. And if you're not a Football Insider subscriber, go get subscribed. It's cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. Browns losers today in Chicago, 31-3. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.